This is an original fictional horror story written in the style of a true supernatural account. Deep in the forests of Oregon, hidden beneath towering pine trees and endless fog, there was a forgotten town called Crimson Hollow. It appeared on old maps. It had roads. It had homes. It even had a church. But almost no tourists had ever heard of it. The few people who passed through the area always noticed something strange. Every single house closed its curtains before sunset. Children disappeared indoors long before dark. The streets became completely empty. And when the last rays of sunlight vanished behind the mountains, the town looked abandoned. No one ever explained why. No one wanted to. Jack Anderson, a 31-year-old documentary filmmaker from Seattle, had built his career exploring America's strangest mysteries. Haunted hotels, abandoned prisons, forgotten mining towns. He had visited them all. He didn't believe in monsters. He believed every mystery had a logical explanation. Then, one night, everything changed. At exactly 2:17 a.m., Jack received an anonymous email. There was no subject line, no sender. Only one sentence. If you truly want to meet real monsters, come to Crimson Hollow. But if you enter after sunset, don't expect to leave. Beneath the message was nothing more than a GPS location. Jack smiled. Another internet prank. Or so he thought. Still, his curiosity got the better of him. 2 days later, he packed his cameras, drone, audio recorder, and camping gear into his SUV and headed toward Oregon. He had no idea it would be the biggest mistake of his life. As evening approached, Jack turned onto a narrow forest road. The deeper he drove, the darker it became. The trees were so tall that they blocked almost every trace of sunlight. His GPS signal disappeared. Then, the radio suddenly filled with static. Jack reached for the power button. The screen went black. The radio was off, yet a voice whispered through the speakers. "Turn back." Jack frowned. The voice came again. "You shouldn't be here." A cold chill ran down his spine. He pulled the car over. Silence. Nothing but the wind. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed someone standing between the trees. A tall figure, wearing a long black coat, completely motionless. Jack grabbed his flashlight and stepped out of the SUV. The forest was eerily quiet. He shined the light toward the figure. Nothing. It had vanished. Only a trail of bare footprints remained in the wet soil, leading deeper into the woods. 20 minutes later, a weathered wooden sign appeared beside the road. "Welcome to Crimson Hollow." The paint had nearly faded away. Someone had scratched strange marks across the sign as if they had tried to erase the town's name. Jack drove into town. It felt wrong. There were houses, there were cars, but not a single person outside. No children, no dogs, no traffic. Just silence. An old man sat alone on a wooden rocking chair outside a small grocery store. Jack walked over with his camera. "Hi, I'm filming a documentary about forgotten American towns." The old man slowly looked up. His eyes were filled with exhaustion. "You shouldn't stay here after sunset." Jack laughed. "I've heard that before." The old man didn't smile. "I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to save you." Jack lowered his camera. "What happens here at night?" The old man looked toward the forest. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then he whispered, "Night doesn't belong to people anymore." Before Jack could ask another question, the old man stood up, walked inside his house, and locked the door. The only place to stay in Crimson Hollow was a tiny roadside motel. Its owner introduced himself as Martin. He looked nervous from the moment Jack arrived. After handing him the room key, Martin hesitated before speaking. "If nothing happens tonight," he paused, "don't open your door." Jack smiled. "What if it's the police?" "No. What if someone needs help?" Martin's face turned pale. "Especially then." Jack stared at him. "Why?" Martin slowly pulled every curtain shut. Then he answered in a voice barely louder than a whisper. "Because not every voice outside belongs to a human." That night, at exactly 11:42 p.m., Jack set up his camera near the motel window. He wanted footage of the empty streets. Outside, the town looked lifeless. Then, a little girl appeared in the middle of the road. She couldn't have been older than 8. She wore an old white dress. Her long black hair covered part of her face. She wasn't moving. She was simply staring at the motel. Jack zoomed in. The little girl slowly smiled. Then, without moving the rest of her body, her neck twisted almost 180 degrees. Jack froze. His heart began pounding. Just then, someone pounded on his motel door. Bang, bang, bang. It was Martin. "Close the curtains." Jack looked back toward the window. "The little girl, who is she?" Martin glanced outside for less than a second. Every bit of color drained from his face. He slammed the curtains shut. "That," he whispered, "isn't a little girl." Jack swallowed hard. "What is she?" Martin's hands began shaking. "They send her first." "Who sends her?" Martin never answered, because at that exact moment, every light inside the motel went out. The room fell into complete darkness. And from outside the door, a soft little girl's voice echoed through the hallway. "Please, I'm scared. Can somebody help me?" Jack instinctively reached for the doorknob. Martin grabbed him with surprising strength. His voice trembled. "If you open that door..." He looked Jack directly in the eyes. "Neither of us will live to see the morning."
The night that chose its victim. The little girl's voice echoed through the hallway. "Please, I'm cold. Can somebody help me?" Jack instinctively reached for the doorknob. Martin grabbed his wrist so hard it almost hurt. "Don't." "But she's just a child." Martin slowly shook his head. "No." His voice barely escaped his lips. "She only looks like one." The crying outside suddenly stopped. Complete silence. Jack glanced toward the window. The curtains barely covered the glass. Curiosity got the better of him. He carefully pulled one corner aside. The little girl was still standing in the middle of the empty street. Moonlight illuminated her white dress. She hadn't moved an inch. Jack looked down. His breathing stopped. She had no shadow. The moonlight covered the road. The trees cast long shadows. Even the motel sign had a shadow. But the little girl had none. Before Jack could react, she slowly lifted her head. Her smile stretched wider than any human face should. A loud crack echoed through the street. Her neck twisted backward. Then her mouth opened far wider than seemed possible. Rows of razor-sharp teeth filled her smile. Jack stumbled backward. What is that?" Martin didn't answer immediately. He simply whispered, "They're testing you." A second later, heavy footsteps thundered across the motel roof. Thud, thud, thud. Something enormous was walking above them. Each step made dust fall from the ceiling. Jack grabbed his flashlight. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a slow scratching sound. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Something was dragging long claws across the roof. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. The scratching moved toward the window. Suddenly, a pale face appeared inches behind the glass. Blood-red eyes, snow-white skin, lips stained with fresh blood. The creature smiled without blinking. Its eyes never left Jack. Then it vanished. Not by running, not by jumping. It simply disappeared. Jack rushed to the window. Nothing. The street was empty again. Martin sighed. It changed positions. What do you mean? They never attack from where you expect. Moments later, a scream shattered the silence. It came from somewhere behind the motel. A man's scream, desperate, terrified. Then, nothing. The silence returned. Jack stared at Martin. Someone's out there. Martin closed his eyes. We're too late. You mean we're not going to help him? Martin looked directly at Jack. If you step outside tonight, there'll be 2 screams instead of 1. Jack's hands trembled. I need answers. Martin nodded slowly. You deserve them. He walked to an old wooden cabinet hidden behind the reception desk. Inside were several strange objects. A silver knife, a worn wooden cross, a leather journal covered in dust. Martin carefully picked up the journal. My grandfather wrote this. He opened it to a faded page. The first disappearances happened over a century ago. Hunters, travelers, loggers. They vanished one by one. Jack listened in silence. People blamed wolves, then bears, then serial killers. Martin looked toward the dark window. They were wrong. He swallowed hard. They were vampires. Jack almost laughed, but Martin wasn't joking. There are hundreds of them beneath these forests. They don't hunt because they're hungry. They hunt because this town belongs to them. Jack leaned forward. If that's true, why hasn't the government done anything? They tried. The police came. They disappeared. The National Guard investigated. They found nothing. The forest hides its secrets. Jack looked toward the window again. For the first time in years, he realized he had no logical explanation. Slowly, he pulled the curtain aside once more. The little girl was gone. Instead, dozens of glowing red eyes stared from the edge of the forest, perfectly still, watching the motel, watching him, waiting. Jack counted at least 20 pairs, then 30, then he stopped counting. There were too many. Martin quietly loaded fresh batteries into an old lantern. When the sun rises, we're going somewhere. Where? To the church. Why? Because the only people who know the truth have been hiding beneath it for generations. Jack frowned. Hiding from vampires? Martin nodded. And protecting something far more important. Around 4 in the morning, the strange voices outside finally disappeared. The red eyes faded into the darkness. The town remained silent. Neither Jack nor Martin slept. Just before sunrise, Jack reviewed the footage from his camera. His blood ran cold. The little girl had never appeared on the recording. The empty road was completely deserted. Yet a reflection in the motel window revealed something else. Standing directly behind Jack, only a few feet away, was a tall figure wearing a long black coat. Its glowing crimson eyes were fixed on him. Jack immediately spun around. The room was empty. He replayed the footage. The figure was still there, watching him, waiting. Then, at the very last second of the recording, a deep voice whispered through the camera's microphone. "We've been waiting for you, Jack Anderson."
Jack's face turned pale. He had never told anyone in Crimson Hollow his full name. Slowly, he looked at Martin. "How do they know who I am?" Martin didn't answer, because for the first time since Jack arrived, Martin looked truly afraid.
The first rays of sunlight finally broke through the thick Oregon fog. For the first time since arriving in Crimson Hollow, Jack felt like he could breathe again. The glowing red eyes had disappeared. The streets slowly came back to life. Front doors opened one by one. People stepped outside, but no one smiled. Every face carried the same exhausted expression: fear. A middle-aged woman sat on the porch of a small house, quietly crying. An elderly man walked toward the church with his head lowered, holding a bouquet of white flowers. A pickup truck drove slowly through town, but its driver's seat was empty. Only then did Jack notice the passenger, a young boy, no older than 12, staring silently out the window. No one spoke about what had happened during the night. It was as if everyone had agreed to pretend nothing had happened. Martin started his old pickup truck. "We're leaving now." Jack climbed into the passenger seat. "Where exactly are we going?" Martin looked toward the church standing on the highest hill in town, to the only place the vampires fear. The church was over 200 years old. Its wooden walls were weathered by decades of rain and snow. The bell tower leaned slightly to one side. Huge iron chains wrapped around the front doors, as if they had once been used to keep something inside, or keep something out. Martin knocked 3 times. Knock, knock, knock. Several seconds passed. The heavy doors slowly creaked open. Standing inside was an elderly priest with silver hair and tired blue eyes. Around his neck hung a large silver cross. "Martin," said the old priest quietly, "I see you've brought him." Jack frowned. "You were expecting me?" The priest looked into Jack's eyes for a long moment. "No." His expression darkened. "We were hoping you would never come. My name is Father Gabriel." He stepped aside. "Come inside." The church smelled of old wood and melted candle wax. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, painting the floor with shades of red and blue. Everything seemed peaceful, until Father Gabriel rolled back an old carpet near the altar. Hidden beneath it was a thick wooden hatch. Jack looked at Martin. "You've got to be kidding." Martin shook his head. "I wish I were." The hatch opened with a deep groan. Cold air rushed upward from the darkness below. Stone stairs disappeared into the earth. Father Gabriel lit an old lantern. "Everything begins down there." The staircase seemed endless. The deeper they walked, the colder the air became. Moisture dripped from the stone ceiling. Ancient symbols had been carved into the walls centuries ago. Some showed people carrying crosses. Others showed pale creatures with glowing eyes. Every few feet another strange symbol appeared. Jack filmed everything. "This place isn't on any map." Father Gabriel smiled sadly. "It isn't supposed to be." At the bottom of the staircase stood a massive underground chamber. Hundreds of candles burned along the walls. Ancient wooden shelves held dusty books, old journals, silver weapons, and faded photographs. In the center of the room rested a stone table. On top of it lay a thick, leather-bound book. Its cover was stained dark red. One word had been carved into it: Sanguis. Jack gently brushed dust from the cover. "What is this?" Father Gabriel answered quietly. "The oldest record ever written about Crimson Hollow." He opened the book. The pages looked impossibly old. The first sentence read, "When the first blood touched this valley, the darkness awakened." Jack felt a chill crawl down his spine. Father Gabriel slowly turned another page. An old black-and-white photograph had been carefully preserved inside. Nearly 20 people stood in front of the church: men, women, children, and one young man standing in the center. Jack's heartbeat stopped. The man looked exactly like him.
The same eyes, the same jawline, even the small scar above his right eyebrow. Jack stepped backward. No, that's impossible. Father Gabriel looked at him with deep sadness. That photograph was taken in 1884. Jack stared at it again. The date was clearly written beneath the picture, October 17th, 1884. His voice barely came out. Who is he? Father Gabriel slowly closed the book. That, he whispered, is the question we've feared for more than a century. Before Jack could speak again, a violent crash echoed from above. Boom! The entire underground chamber shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. Another impact followed. Boom! Martin looked toward the staircase, his face turned pale. They never attack during daylight. Father Gabriel tightened his grip on the lantern. His voice dropped to almost a whisper. If they're attacking now, he paused, it means something impossible has happened. Jack looked between them. What? Father Gabriel slowly raised his eyes. The Vampire King. His voice was just a whisper. Has awakened. At that exact moment, a deep, inhuman roar echoed beneath the earth. It didn't sound like an animal. It didn't sound human. It sounded ancient, and it was getting closer.
The roar echoed through the underground chamber. The stone walls trembled. Dust drifted from the ceiling as every candle flickered at once. No one spoke. Jack tightened his grip on the camera. What was that? Father Gabriel slowly closed the ancient book. His face had turned pale. That wasn't just a vampire. He swallowed hard. That was Lucian. Martin froze. No. Father Gabriel nodded. Yes, the Vampire King has awakened. For several seconds, the chamber remained silent. Only the distant rumble beneath the earth could be heard. Jack stared at both men. I need the truth. Father Gabriel looked into his eyes. You deserve it. He opened Sanguis again and carefully turned to one of the final chapters. Inside was another photograph. This one was even older. It showed a young man standing beside several armed hunters. Jack felt his heart skip a beat. The young man looked exactly like him. Not similar. Exactly the same. His name was Adrian Anderson, Father Gabriel said. He was the last man who ever wounded Lucian. Jack couldn't take his eyes off the photograph. When was this taken? October 1884. Jack shook his head. This can't be real. It is. Father Gabriel pointed to a faded journal entry written beneath the photograph. Before Adrian disappeared, he wrote one final warning. He slowly read the ancient words aloud. One day, my bloodline will return to finish what I could not. Jack's voice trembled. You think I'm that person? Father Gabriel answered quietly. I don't think. I know. Another deafening impact shook the chamber. Boom! A crack spread across one of the stone walls. Candles toppled onto the floor. Martin looked toward the staircase. They're inside the church. Before anyone could react, a freezing wind swept through the chamber. Every candle went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Then, two glowing crimson eyes appeared in the shadows, followed by a tall figure, over 7 feet tall, wearing a long black coat. His skin was pale as marble. His eyes burned like fresh blood. And when he smiled, rows of razor-sharp fangs caught the faint light. He took one slow step forward, then another. His voice was calm, almost elegant. So, after 140 years, the Anderson bloodline finally returns. Jack forced himself to stand his ground. Who are you? The creature bowed slightly. My name is Lucian. I was the first ruler of Crimson Hollow,
and I have waited centuries for this moment." Martin instinctively raised his silver knife. Lucian didn't even look at him. His eyes never left Jack. Jack swallowed hard. "What do you want from me?" Lucian smiled. "You believe I came here to kill you." He slowly shook his head. "No, I've protected your bloodline." Jack frowned. "What?" "Because only your blood can complete the ritual." The room fell silent. Father Gabriel's expression changed instantly. "No." Lucian looked at him with amusement. "You finally understand." He turned back to Jack. "Your ancestor wounded me, but he also unknowingly cursed his own family. For generations, I've waited for one final descendant, you." Jack's breathing became uneven. "What ritual?" Lucian spread his arms. "When your blood touches the blood heart, I will no longer fear daylight. I won't be trapped in darkness. I'll walk beneath the sun, and humanity," he smiled wider, "will become my kingdom." Without warning, Martin threw his silver knife. It struck Lucy directly in the chest. The vampire king looked down, then calmly pulled the blade free. The wound healed before their eyes. Within seconds, his skin was flawless again. Lucian chuckled. "You still believe silver is enough." He moved. No one even saw him cross the room. One moment, he stood 20 feet away. The next, Martin slammed into the stone wall with terrifying force. He collapsed to the floor, coughing blood. Jack rushed toward him. Father Gabriel shouted, "Jack, the book!" Jack grabbed Sanguis from the stone table. The moment his hands touched the cover, the final pages began turning themselves. A hidden map appeared, drawn in faded crimson ink. At its center was a glowing symbol. Father Gabriel gasped. "The blood heart." Jack looked up. "What is it?" "The source of Lucian's immortality. It isn't inside him, it's hidden beneath Crimson Hollow. If the blood heart is destroyed, he dies forever." For the first time, fear appeared in Lucian's eyes. Only for a second, then it vanished. He smiled again. "So, you've finally found the truth." He slowly stepped backward into the darkness. "I'll give you one night. Tomorrow, I'll come for you. And when I do, the age of vampires will begin." His body dissolved into black smoke. Within seconds, he was gone. Silence returned to the underground chamber. Martin struggled to sit up. Father Gabriel carefully rolled up the ancient map. He looked at Jack. "We have until tomorrow night. No more." Jack stared at the map, then at the shattered doorway where Lucian had disappeared. He had arrived in Crimson Hollow as a documentary filmmaker. Now, he was the last man standing between humanity and the Vampire King.
Cold rain poured over Crimson Hollow as thunder rolled across the Oregon mountains. The entire town was silent. No lights, no voices, no movement. Everyone knew tonight would decide the fate of Crimson Hollow forever. Inside the underground chamber beneath the church, Jack, Martin, and Father Gabriel stood around the ancient map. At its center was a single destination, the Blood Heart. Father Gabriel took a deep breath. According to Sanguis, the Blood Heart lies beneath Black Hollow Cave, nearly 3 miles north of town. Martin loaded fresh rounds into his flare gun. "If Lucian reaches it before we do," Father Gabriel finished the sentence, "there won't be another sunrise for humanity." Jack silently picked up his backpack, his camera, and Adrian Anderson's silver cross. It's time. Into Black Hollow Cave. The forest felt different that night. The trees seemed taller, the shadows darker. Even the wind carried an eerie whisper. After nearly an hour of hiking through the rain, they reached the entrance of Black Hollow Cave. The cave breathed icy air. The walls were stained with strange crimson minerals that looked disturbingly like dried blood. Jack switched on his flashlight. The beam disappeared into endless darkness. Then, a distant growl echoed from deep inside. Martin looked at Jack. They know we're here. The army of the night. As they ventured deeper into the cave, glowing crimson eyes slowly appeared in the darkness. One pair, then 5, then dozens. Within seconds, hundreds of vampires surrounded them. Some crawled across the ceiling, others clung to the cave walls. Not a single one made a sound. They simply watched, waiting for a command. Then, a deep voice echoed through the cave. "Leave." It was Lucian. His voice seemed to come from every direction. "You still have time to save yourselves." Jack stepped forward. "We're ending this tonight." Laughter echoed through the cave. Low, cold, ancient. The Blood Heart. At the center of the cavern stood an enormous stone altar. Floating above it was a crystal unlike anything Jack had ever seen. It pulsed like a living heart. Every beat sent crimson light racing through the cave. Thump, thump, thump. The vampires all bowed their heads. The Blood Heart was alive. Lucian stepped from the darkness. His black coat flowed behind him as though the shadows themselves obeyed him. "You finally found it." Jack gripped the silver cross. "It's over." Lucian smiled. "No, it's only beginning." The truth. Lucian slowly circled the altar. "You still believe destroying the Blood Heart will save the world?" Jack didn't answer. Lucian stopped. "Your ancestor failed because he never understood its true purpose." Father Gabriel frowned. "What are you talking about?" Lucian looked directly at Jack. "The Blood Heart isn't powered by vampire blood." He smiled. "It's powered by yours." Silence filled the cave. Jack's pulse quickened. For centuries, the Anderson bloodline has unknowingly kept it alive. "If you destroy it," Lucian whispered, "your own life ends with it." Martin stepped forward. "He's lying." But Father Gabriel remained silent. Deep down, he knew Lucian was telling the truth. The final choice. Jack stared at the glowing crystal, then at Martin, then at Father Gabriel. "So that's why they never killed me." Lucian nodded. "I didn't need your death. I needed your sacrifice." He stretched out one hand. "Join me. You'll live forever. You'll rule beside me." Jack looked around the cave. He saw the terrified faces of the townspeople in his mind, the missing families, the frightened little boy, the woman crying on her porch. He remembered why he came, not for fame, not for a documentary, but now to save innocent lives. He quietly smiled. "I already made my choice." The last battle. Lucian roared. Every vampire charged at once. Martin fired his flare gun. A blazing burst of light exploded across the cave, forcing dozens of vampires backward. Father Gabriel raised Adrian's silver cross and began reciting an ancient prayer. Brilliant white light filled the cavern. The vampires screamed in agony. Jack sprinted towards the Blood Heart. Lucian appeared in front of him in an instant. They collided. Jack was thrown across the stone floor. Lucian lifted him by the throat. "You cannot win." Jack struggled to breathe. Then he reached into his jacket. Adrian's silver cross. He drove it into Lucian's shoulder. The Vampire King screamed and staggered backward. It wasn't enough to kill him, but it gave Jack one chance, one final chance. The end of the darkness. Jack climbed onto the altar. The Blood Heart beat faster. Thump, thump, thump. Lucian screamed. "No!" Jack wrapped both hands around the crystal. He looked once more at Martin. "Tell them, the night is over." With every ounce of strength he had, Jack slammed the Blood Heart onto the stone altar. The crystal shattered. A deafening explosion tore through the cave. Crimson light erupted in every direction. Every vampire froze. Then,
One by one, they turned to ash. Lucian looked at his own hands as cracks spread across his skin. His immortal body began to crumble. "No, this isn't possible!" His final scream echoed through the cave as the Vampire King dissolved into dust. The darkness was gone forever. 1 year later. Crimson Hollow had changed. Children laughed in the streets. Windows remained open after sunset. For the first time in generations, no one feared the night. Outside the old church stood a simple stone memorial. It read, "Jack Anderson. He gave his life so others could keep theirs." Every year, the people of Crimson Hollow placed fresh flowers beneath it. No one forgot the man who ended the curse. The final twist. Nearly a year later, 2 hikers exploring the Oregon wilderness discovered Jack's damaged camera buried beneath fallen rocks. Most of the footage was corrupted, except for the final recording. Jack looked directly into the lens. His face was bruised. His voice was calm. "If you're watching this, never come looking for Crimson Hollow." The recording glitched. Static filled the screen. Then, for less than a second, 2 glowing crimson eyes appeared behind Jack. Not Lucian's, someone else's. The screen went black. The video ended. But one question remained. Was Lucian truly the first, or was something even older still waiting beneath the forest?